Fighting games started with something as simple as moving around and using basic attacks. Later on they started improving by adding special attacks and combos. Even though the fighting genre was improving really fast, it sadly reached its peak really soon. Old games like Street Fighter Third Strike and Tekken 3 are considered peak fighting games even until now. By peak, I don't mean there aren't better fighting games out there. Tekken 5 is obviously better than Tekken 3, but not by much, and Tekken 8 is only slightly better than Tekken 5, so even though better fighting games do exist, they are all still on the same level. Many fighting game franchises were born inspired by the Street Fighter franchise. Those are considered 2D fighting games, and they share a lot of similarities. There are three main character archetypes. The Zoner, which is mostly about keeping your opponent away and spamming projectiles to damage them slowly and steadily. The Rushdown archetype, which relies on getting close to the opponent and killing them fast by using huge combos along with mix-ups to confuse and kill the opponent really fast. And then there is the Grappler archetype, which is obviously about getting close to the opponent and using grab moves that deal a lot of damage to destroy them. The Grapplers are extremely strong at melee range but useless at long range, and they move really slowly, meaning that Zoners have a huge advantage against them. On the other hand, the Rushdown characters move extremely fast, meaning they can close the gap the Zoners are trying to keep, and since it's so easy for them to get close, Zoners are always at disadvantage against them. But on the opposite, Grapplers are even stronger at melee range, and the Rushdown characters have a lot of trouble fighting Grapplers since their moving speed doesn't really help them much. The entire point of the Grapplers are to move close so they can use their grab attacks, and all the Rushdown characters can do is to get close at them, giving them what they want. So we essentially have a rock paper scissors situation, where one archetype beats another, based purely on move advantages. That kind of gameplay design by itself is already not very appealing. A huge portion of the game is decided by the character pick. I think a really good way to fix that would be to give each character extra stances. Each stance should give you a completely different moveset by using the same buttons. For example, a special move that is supposed to be a grab attack from a grappler should become a throwing projectile by changing the grappler character to their zoner stance, and by changing them to a rushdown stance they should be capable of moving faster and doing a lot of combos with all kinds of different attacks. Each character should be capable of playing as any archetype by freely changing all those stances, and of course that would require a lot of balancing as well, but at the same time that would technically mean they can reduce the characters to 1/3 of what they have. Each character would feel way more unique and interesting to master instead of having an entire screen filled with characters that you forget they even existed after you move on to the next game. Fighting games like Tekken are considered 3D games. They don't have the archetype system of the 2D games, and instead all characters are playing at melee range and they have huge movesets allowing you to do tons of combos. One of my biggest problems with games like Tekken is the defensive options. Watching an opponent do a lot of combos on you is always boring, even if you are managing to block all the attacks and know how to punish. It feels more like a test of patience than a test of skill. In Street Fighter Third Strike there is a parry mechanic, but the kind of parry I prefer is the one in Soul Calibur games, the one known as guard impact. It can be used at any point, even if the enemy has already started the combo and you are blocking. If you know the precise timing of a single attack, you can use your guard impact to completely stop the combo and get a chance to start fighting back immediately. And of course, the opponent gets a chance to use a guard impact right after yours, so they just won't get immediately punished, allowing way more options in both offensive and defensive playstyles, making the fights way more engaging, fun and skill based. Soul Calibur is my favorite fighting franchise. Besides doing a lot of things right, the stages are not just decoration, they are a huge part of the gameplay. Besides the walls that allow you to pressure your opponent by limiting their movement and doing extra wall combos, there is also the option of throwing them out of the ring. That makes the positioning matter way more, and of course there are mechanics that allow you to move way more freely in the entire stage, and mechanics that allow you to control yourself even when you are getting getting hit on the air. So even if you are getting pummeled by enemy combos while being juggled on the air, you are not just standing there and watching, but you are still engaging in the gameplay in a way that matters a lot. For example, if an enemy is close to getting you out of the ring, by using air control you can avoid that and position yourself properly so you can use one of your attacks that have a lot of pushing impact and turn the game around immediately. I find that kind of strategic playstyle interesting. In Soul Calibur 3 there were also a lot of gimmicky stages, like the one with an earthquake happening, one that is slippery, and another one with explosive walls. I found those fun and a good break from the usual gameplay. Sadly, we don't get to see many of those in fighting games except for the Smash franchise. The Smash franchise is a platforming fighting game on its entirety. There are tons of unique stages with hazards, and there are even items you can use against your opponents. Also, there can be up to 4 players playing at the same time. If we are looking purely at the fun aspect, then the Smash franchise is definitely doing it better than the rest of the fighting games. The biggest problem with the Smash franchise though is that it's for casuals. Smash games with a high skill ceiling did exist in the past, but for some reason the developers thought making these games more noob friendly would get them a bigger audience. There is nothing wrong with making your games casual friendly, but removing the skill ceiling is a terrible mistake. Games should be easy to get into and hard to master. Many casuals invest so much time in these games because they are looking up to the most skilled players. By removing the skill ceiling and allowing everyone to win easily, you are alienating the most skilled players, which makes these games boring because getting free wins can only be fun for a while. Getting wins because you are better than the rest can be fun for as long as you keep improving and seeing your results. All those fighting game tournaments are not just there because many people play these games, but because the best of the best decided to have a contest against each other to see who stands at the very top, and the rest of the players wanted to see their greatness and even learn something from it if possible. Allowing casuals to get free wins against skilled players was a terrible mistake. One of the main problems fighting games used to have is they are mostly versus games, which means you needed to have someone you can play with. For some people that was already an impossible task. Now thankfully to the advancement of the internet, you can sit in your room and play with anyone anywhere in the entire world. That being said, there are netcode problems. Many of these online games have terrible lagging issues, and many times the developers don't ever care fixing them because they know most players will give up and move on after a couple of months anyway. Getting into a fighting game with a high skill ceiling is a painful experience for newcomers. These games require you to invest a lot of time. You need to keep practicing constantly, and also you need to make sure you don't take many breaks because you can get rusty. The problem is not just the time itself, but the fact that it's not even fun. The options you have to get better at these games are very limited. Learning to do combos on practice mode gets boring very quickly, and playing online matches is many times a pointless experience. There are times you will destroy an opponent without even trying, and there are times you will get destroyed by a highly experienced opponent without getting the chance to learn anything. The rest of the single player options are extremely limited, almost non-existent I would say, and the enemy AI is complete garbage. To get a newcomer really invested in your game, you need to have a really good single player mode. Old single player games like Tenchu, Zone of the Enders, Silent Bomber and many others had an incredible single player mode, and by progressing them and beating bosses, you were unlocking characters in their versus mode as well. Their versus mode wasn't anything special or super complex like the fighting games, but it was fun and it incentivized people to experiment with the new characters every time a new one was unlocked. Sadly, in the modern fighting games or any kind of versus games, the single player modes are just there to pretend that the games can be played on single player mode as well, when in reality there was almost no effort done in these modes. The way the modern fighting games are made, it feels like they are just using predatory tactics to exploit all the fighting players who are still in love with the genre and are looking forward to the next new fighting game, expecting it to give them even the slightest feeling of nostalgia when they were actually enjoying these games. Constantly releasing characters and costumes, putting them behind huge paywalls are all disgusting marketing practices.